Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back from another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have Army swears in Lieutenant Colonels from tech executives as Det 201, and that's posted by CH4Locks, and that's cross-posted from the military subreddit, and that's the link to, it looks like a screenshot from the Army.military website. Washington, U.S. Army's establishment Detachment 201, the Army's Executive Innovative Corps, a new initiative designed to fuse cutting-edge tech expertise with military innovation. On June 13th, 2025, the Army will officially swear in 4 tech leaders. Detachment 201 is an effort to recruit senior tech executives to serve part-time in the Army Reserve as senior advisors. In this role, they will work on targeted projects to help guide rapid and scalable tech solutions to complex problems. But by bringing private sector know-how into uniform, Detachment 201 is supercharging efforts like the Army Transformation Initiative, which aims to make the force leaner, smarter, and more lethal. The 4 new Army Reserve Lieutenant Colonels are Shyam Sankar, Chief Technology Officer for Palantir, Andrew Bosworth, Chief Technology Officer of Meta, Kevin Welch, Chief Product Officer of OpenAI, and Bob McGraw, Advisor of Making Machines Lab and former Chief Resource Officer for OpenAI. And yeah, my thoughts on that are, as I always like to say, big business and big government are often intertwined. So, of course the government's going to reward people, usually rewards private sector allies who are on their side, and this is no exception to that. And yeah, I personally don't really care for it, but ultimately those in positions of government power are going to justify whatever they feel like, and that often includes giving their private sector buddies benefits. You see it a lot with the Democrats as well, when they give their NGO and charity buddies benefits. And it's the same right here with the Republicans and their private tech sector buddies at like Palantir or OpenAI. Then we have, we're not going to approve windmills. You go and look at these beautiful plains and valleys, and they're loaded up with this garbage that gets worse and worse with looking of time. We're not going to approve windmills unless something happens that's an emergency. And that's posted by CH4Locks from thehill.com. That's cross-post from the energy subreddit. And yeah, well, my eye, sorry, I'm doing my eye so much, it's just kind of watery today. Yeah, I personally don't really care for that. I think if people want to build windmills, they should build windmills. But regardless, if the government doesn't want to build windmills, even if they are probably more sustainable energy resource than a lot of people make them out to be, they shouldn't be forced to do so. Ultimately, it's the government's decision since they have the monopoly on legal use of force. Ultimately, I think the libertarian position is if people want to build private windmills for energy, they should be able to. But I don't think we should have public energy at all, because the government would just pick winners and losers. With that being said, ultimately, I think, some stuff, the government might have, as the only one they can build, like nuclear. I mean, well, you can have private nuclear plants, I guess, but most government isn't going to let you just build a private nuclear plant on your property, even if it's your property. And yeah, that's why I personally think, as I said, energy should be purely a private sector thing rather than a public sector thing. And we have great anti-dictatorship movement this weekend, all 50 states involved, from Donald Key, and that's cross-post from the 5051 subreddit. And yeah, it says Trump will be feed one way or another. We have numbers. And yeah, personally, I don't think that the protests really did too much. It's pretty much just an IRL Reddit shitlib circle jerk. And yeah, I personally can barely tolerate shitlibs on Reddit. So that's why I didn't go. I don't want to be involved with them IRL as well. They have every right to protest, but the protests are ultimately changed nothing. And they 2 months ago they had the hands-off protests. Now they have these No Kings protests. What's next? They'll probably have the jerk-off protest. That's what they were being honest. That's what they'd be called. It'd be called the jerk-off protest, because that's all they do is jerk themselves off and think they're these revolutionaries, when in reality, they're just a bunch of losers and LARPers who do whatever the current narrative says. And it's like, oh, I hate billionaires, but the billionaire Walmart heiress and George Soros fund the protest, and they don't care about them, because they're completely fine with billionaires when they play for their team. So yeah, it's pretty much just nothing but performative, virtue signaling LARP. But that's pretty much all politics is at this point, to be fair. Then we have arrested for masks from posted by Ragnar OKXG, and that's cross post from the Savannah subreddit. And yeah, I don't really think people should. I think people should be allowed to wear whatever they want. But if the government wants to arrest you for wearing a mask, they ultimately have the monopoly on the use of force, justify doing whatever they want to. So yeah, I personally don't care for it, but yeah, ultimately the government can arrest you for wearing whatever you want, whatever it thinks is a threat, and that's my thoughts on that issue. They have the monopoly on legal use of force, justify doing whatever they want. Then we have extremely disturbing and unethical. New rules allow VA doctors to refuse to treat Democrats, unmarried veterans, from TheGuardian.com, posted by Donald Key, and that's cross-post from the military subreddit. And yeah, I really don't care for that. But, I think it's just more, editorializing from the left-leaning Guardian. It's probably like they won't treat Democrats or unmarried veterans if it's a bad situation, if they're not covered or something, just like everyone else. But of course, the media, they always love to push their agenda, and it's like Michael Malice says, they're factual but not truthful. This might be a fact that they might not be treating Democrats or unmarried veterans, but there's probably more to it than that. But the media always just needs engagement above all else, so they always push out headlines like this. And eventually people need to catch on to that, but people don't seem to ever catch on to that when it's their side doing it. Then we have, so now he can use Truth Social for official orders from Ragnar OKXG, and that's cross-post from the Live News 24H subreddit. Just in, Trump orders ICE agents via Truth to do all in their power to achieve mass deportations. And yeah, Trump is in his first term, he pretty much used Twitter to govern. Now in this term, he's more using Truth Social to govern. This isn't too much of a surprise. Ultimately, if he wants to use whatever he wants to govern, that's on him. But ultimately, social media is much more of a circle jerk than anything else. And that's why Trump's pretty much a social media president. All he does is tweet or truth or post whatever he is on his mind. And yeah, even if and that's pretty much how he's always issued his orders, going back to the first day of his first presidency. So I don't know why this is surprising to people. And we have GOP Senator Rand Paul shifts tone on Trump's big beautiful bill, says he is not an absolute no, from LatinTimes.com, posted by Donald Key. And yeah, personally I think Rand Paul is probably one of the most principled people in the Congress. But with that being said, you do have to bend over back for Trump sometimes so he doesn't go after you too much. So yeah, I personally would have said this if I was him. But, it's good that he's keeping an open mind. Of course, Reddit, they think everyone with an R next to their name is automatically a Nazi, so Reddit won't like this. And, of course, Reddit's going to pounce on it because Reddit hates anyone who dissents at all from the official DNC narrative. And, you can have an R next to your name and dissent from the official DNC narrative, and you'll still be a Nazi, just like Rand Paul or Thomas Massie. And, yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have... Take it or leave Newsom, but the stay in your lane tweets are killing me, and that's written by Donald Queen. That's a Gavin Newsom tweet. Your state's homicide rate is 117% higher than California's. That's him quote tweeting Representative Jason Smith of Missouri. Governor is just focusing on lawlessness and crime in LA and San Francisco instead of auditioning for the 2024 presidential primary stale talking points. And I'd agree more with Smith there. The homicide rate in Missouri may be higher than California, but California is definitely very much in distress right now with all the riots and fires going on there. But Gavin Newsom's just interested in having a pissing contest with Trump and building his political capital for the 2028 election, and that's why, people like him should be nowhere near power, but sadly, they're the only ones who ever seem to get it. Then we have Dave Smith apologizes for supporting Trump, calls for impeachment, edited title to avoid clickbait from Newsweek.com, posted by Dr. Who 07. And yeah, I'm glad Dr. Dave Smith is changing his position. Ultimately, I don't think he should have been supporting Trump in the first place, but I could see him going for him as lesser of two evils since Kamala was campaigning around with the Cheneys during her campaign, and the Cheneys are huge warmongers, even more so than Trump. I do think Trump is definitely more of a warmonger than he makes himself out to be, but regardless, nothing usually ever seems to happen, and that's probably what's going to happen with this Iran-Israel stuff. This is like the 12th time Iran and Israel have attacked each other this decade, it seems. And yeah, nothing will probably happen. It's like when the U.S. Killed Soleimani in a drone, their General Soleimani in a drone strike from Iran, and Yeah, nothing ever will happen. Tensions will ease. The cooler heads will prevail. And that's because nuclear. No one wants to use nuclear weapons because nuclear weapons haven't been used outside of a test setting since like 80 years ago, August 1945. And that just goes to show you how it might seem like Trump will say stuff with gusto, like everyone needs to evacuate Tehran, but that's just him, jerking himself off. That's all pretty much Trump does is jerk himself off and rile everyone up, and people really should have caught on to that by now. But yeah, I definitely agree with Dave Smith's position. Trump, he might be the lesser of two evils, but regardless, he's still part of the global neoliberal warmongers, and that's not libertarian. He might be libertarian compared to Kamala Harris, but maybe Joseph Stalin was nicer to the Jews than Hitler. That's not very much an accomplishment. We have California lawmakers introduce legislation to ban law enforcement from wearing face coverings from abcnews.go.com, posted by Ninja Lover. And yeah, I personally think, people should be able to wear whatever they want to. As I said, back for a few months ago, there were the people who were arrested for wearing masks in Savannah. But ultimately, if they want to ban police officers from wearing face off coverings, the state can justify enforcing whatever laws it feels like. But ultimately, it matters how they're enforced, and the police officers are often the ones who are enforcing the law. So it's up to their discretion, because you can write down whatever laws you want. If you're not enforcing them, then they're pretty much just words on a piece of paper. And yeah, ultimately, I don't really care for face coverings as a whole. I think it's just a way to conceal your identity. But there's a lot of Antifa and Proud Boys wear face coverings as well, and they're probably feds. But Reddit would never care about a law for that, because Reddit just cares because the cops are bad. But they think Antifa's completely fine, even though a lot of that's federal entrapment as well, because Antifa's on their side. And as I always say, people don't have values in politics these days. Well, most of the vast majority of people, they only have teams, and you definitely see that when it comes to laws like this. They just want to ban the law enforcement from wearing face coverings, but the protesters should be able to wear face coverings, because if they ban lawmakers wearing face coverings, that's good. But when the protesters are banned from wearing face coverings, that's bad, because the protesters are in group and the police are out group. And yeah, that's pretty much all Reddit is at this point. It's every day it's in group good, out group bad, and nothing ever seems to change. And yeah, I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.